I thought I had the perfect marriage, until I uncovered my wife's dark secret. When I confronted her, she didn't just deny it. She flipped the script, staged a crime scene, and called the cops on me. Trapped and betrayed, I had seconds to act. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated me. I had proof, and karma was coming for her. My name is Jason, and never in my life did I imagine I would be sharing a story like this. You enter a marriage believing in love, trust, and commitment, only to discover that the person you cherished was never truly who you thought they were. For years, I believed Claire and I had a solid marriage. She was undeniably beautiful, and I had fallen for her charm without hesitation. We had a child together, the one person in this world who meant everything to me. Sure, we had our share of arguments, but I never thought they were anything out of the ordinary. What I failed to see, what I refused to see, was that Claire had been showing me red flags from the very beginning. From the early years of our marriage, she had a way of making me feel like my opinions didn't matter. I would speak, only to be dismissed or interrupted, as if my words carried no weight. It was blatant disrespect, but I brushed it off, convincing myself that all relationships had their flaws. Over time, her behavior became more secretive. The phone she once left lying around was now permanently attached to her hand. Calls were taken in hushed tones behind closed doors. When I asked who was on the other end, she'd brush me off with a vague, "Just a friend." The distance between us grew. She started going out more, staying out later, and sometimes not even coming home at all. Her excuses were weak, full of inconsistencies that made no sense. But still, I held back. I had grown up in a single-parent household, and I vowed that my child would never experience the same. I told myself things would get better, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. One night, everything changed. Claire left her phone on the couch while she hurried to the bedroom to grab something. Her phone was locked, but for a brief second, a message appeared on the screen, a flirty text from an unsaved number. My heart pounded as I stared at the words before they vanished. I couldn't check for more details, but in that moment, my gut told me everything I needed to know. Doubt and suspicion began to consume me. I couldn't follow Claire around. I had work, responsibilities, but I couldn't ignore what I had seen. That's when I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I hired a private investigator. A friend of mine had used one before and swore by their ability to uncover details the average person would never notice. If Claire was betraying me, I needed proof. Undeniable, concrete evidence that could not be twisted or explained away. The investigator wasted no time. He tracked her movements, documenting where she went, how long she stayed, and, most importantly, who she was meeting. It wasn't just about catching her in a random encounter. He was establishing a pattern, mapping out a double life I had never known existed. He took photos, recorded videos, and gathered every suspicious detail. Meanwhile, I had to pretend like nothing was wrong. Every night, I lay beside Claire in bed, knowing there was a chance she had just come from another man's arms. The waiting was unbearable. Then, one evening, the investigator handed me a folder. My hands trembled as I opened it, and within seconds, my world collapsed. Claire wasn't just cheating, she was involved with multiple men. And these weren't just any men. They were men with power, influence, and status. Some were married themselves, their own families completely unaware of the tangled web of deception. The evidence was damning. Intimate moments in cars, dimly lit lounges, hotel lobbies. My wife wasn't having an affair, she was leading a double life. My mind raced with questions. Why? Was it for money? Status? Some twisted thrill? I had worked tirelessly to provide for our family, ensuring we had a comfortable, stable home. And yet, none of it had been enough for her. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved and trusted, did not exist. That night, I sat in the living room, waiting for Claire to come home. The evidence was spread out in front of me, undeniable proof of her betrayal. I wasn't expecting an apology, but I needed to hear her say it, to at least have the decency to admit what she had done. When she walked in, I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "Claire, we need to talk." Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Panic? She hesitated. "I know everything," I said, my voice unwavering. "Your secret affairs aren't so secret anymore." For a split second, she froze. And then, in a move I never saw coming, she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle or an embarrassed giggle, but a cruel, full-throated laugh that sent chills down my spine. Before I could say another word, she went on the attack. "You've been controlling me for years," she spat. "You track where I go. You don't trust me. And now, you're accusing me of cheating." I was stunned. This wasn't a defense. It was a calculated counterattack. Before I could react, she stormed into the kitchen, yanked open a drawer, and in a move so shocking I could barely process it, she sliced her own arm with a knife. A blood-curdling scream filled the house as she collapsed to the floor. I stood there, frozen, watching in horror as she clutched her arm, tears pouring down her face. Then, with trembling fingers, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Help," she sobbed. "My husband just attacked me. He's out of control. I think he's going to kill me." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a lie. This was a nightmare, a meticulously planned trap. I had seconds to react. My hands instinctively went to my phone, and I quietly started recording. Claire noticed me tapping the screen and immediately demanded, "Who are you texting?" I didn't answer. Her expression hardened. Then, in a cold, steady voice, she whispered words that made my blood run cold. "Nothing will save you from this. I'll make sure you suffer until you die." Moments later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the front of our house. The cops stormed in, guns drawn, demanding that I put my hands where they could see them. Claire sat in the corner, shaking, pointing at me with terrified, tear-streaked eyes. "He snapped," she whimpered. "I just wanted to go out with my friends, and he lost it." I tried to speak, but what could I say? A man defending himself against a sobbing, injured woman? The truth didn't matter in that moment. Within seconds, they had me in cuffs, shoving me into the back of a police car. Sitting in that station, handcuffed to a bench, the realization sank in. Claire had planned this. The affairs, the accusations, the injuries. It was all a calculated move. But what she didn't know was that I had recorded her. I had proof. And no matter how hard she tried to destroy me, she was about to learn that karma had a way of delivering justice. As I sat in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room, my mind replayed the events of the past 24 hours like a broken record. Claire had played her part masterfully, turning herself into the victim, painting me as a violent monster. The police officers who had looked at me with suspicion last night were now preparing to interrogate me as if I were a criminal. But what Claire hadn't counted on was that I had proof, solid, irrefutable proof of her deception. In my pocket was the SD card containing all the evidence the private investigator had gathered, along with the recording from my phone, capturing her cold, calculated words. "Nothing will save you from this. I'll make sure you suffer until you die." My lawyer arrived just in time, a look of determination in his eyes. He had already reviewed the evidence and knew we had more than enough to dismantle Claire's lies. After a tense interrogation session, I calmly slid the SD card across the table. "I suggest you take a look at this before making any assumptions," my lawyer said firmly. The officers hesitated but eventually reviewed the contents. One by one, their expressions shifted from skepticism to shock, then to barely concealed anger. The videos, photos, and Claire's own incriminating words left no room for doubt. Within an hour, I was released without charges. Claire's false accusations had just backfired in the worst possible way. The moment I stepped out of the station, I knew what had to be done. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. Claire had tried to destroy me, take away my child, and ruin my reputation. But now, the tables had turned. The divorce papers had already been prepared, courtesy of my lawyer, who anticipated Claire's next move. Sure enough, as soon as I got home, I found an envelope waiting for me on the kitchen counter. Inside were divorce papers and a request for full custody of our child. The audacity of it all was almost laughable. Claire truly believed she had won. I wasted no time. I filed for divorce immediately, presenting all the evidence to the court. Claire's manipulations, her infidelity, and her false accusations were laid bare for the judge to see. The once confident woman who thought she could control the narrative now sat across from me in the courtroom, her face pale as the reality of her downfall began to sink in. But the consequences didn't stop there. The police, now fully aware of Claire's false report, launched an investigation into her actions. Filing a false police report and attempting to frame an innocent person carried serious consequences. Claire was arrested, her mugshot plastered across local news outlets. The powerful men she had been involved with wasted no time cutting ties with her, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. The divorce proceedings were swift. Not only did Claire lose the case, but she was also ordered to pay damages and legal fees for the chaos she had caused. Her dreams of walking away with the house, the money, and my child had crumbled. Instead, she was left with nothing but legal troubles and a reputation in shambles. The moment of true justice came when the judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of our child. Claire, who had once arrogantly believed she could take everything from me, now had to settle for supervised visits, if she could even afford the legal battles that lay ahead. Her downfall was her own doing. She had orchestrated a grand betrayal, believing she could manipulate the system and come out unscathed. But karma had delivered its justice in full measure. As she sat alone in the courtroom, defeated and humiliated, I realized that I didn't need revenge. The truth had been enough to destroy her. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Claire no longer had any power over me. The nightmare was over, and I was finally ready to start a new chapter of my life, without her. With Claire completely exposed and justice finally served, I could finally breathe. But the storm wasn't over yet. While she had lost the court battle, the legal consequences of her actions continued to unfold. The authorities had charged her with filing a false police report and obstruction of justice, serious offenses that carried the possibility of jail time. The powerful men she had entangled herself with distanced themselves immediately, wanting nothing to do with the scandal. They had reputations and families to protect, and Claire had become nothing more than a liability. She went from feeling invincible to utterly abandoned. The men who once entertained her every whim no longer returned her calls. Without their financial support or influence, she found herself spiraling downward. Claire had thought she could walk away from our marriage rich, taking my assets, my home, and most importantly, my child. But in the end, she lost everything. The judge had granted me full custody, recognizing her as an unfit mother. The limited, supervised visitation she was granted was a mere formality, and even then, she rarely showed up. Financially ruined, her legal troubles only worsened. She was drowning in debt, unable to maintain the lavish lifestyle she had once flaunted. The weight of her own actions bore down on her like an avalanche, and soon enough, she ended up behind bars for her false accusations. Though it wasn't a long sentence, it was enough for her to realize that she had pushed too far, burned every bridge she had. By the time she got out, she was a shell of the woman she once was. The arrogance, the manipulative charm, it was all gone. Without money, status, or allies, she had no way of rebuilding the life she had so recklessly destroyed. But the most painful consequence of all, she had lost the one thing that had truly mattered, our child. She could no longer manipulate, threaten, or lie her way out of reality. Karma had delivered the ultimate justice. As for me, I moved forward. The scars of what she put me through remained, but they no longer defined me. I built a new life, one that was free from deceit and betrayal. Most importantly, I dedicated myself to being the best father possible, ensuring my child grew up in a stable, loving home. Looking back, I realized that Claire had never truly loved me. She had loved control, the thrill of deception, and the illusion of power. But in the end, she was the one who destroyed herself. The truth is, some people don't just want to hurt you, they want to destroy you. And if you let them, they will. But when you stay calm, gather the truth, and play the long game, justice has a way of finding those who deserve it. Claire thought she could manipulate the system, but karma had other plans. She believed she could take everything from me, but in the end, she lost it all. And now, I am free. Completely free.